Real Keal podcast. This episode is all about knowing yourself. And today we have our first and very special guest, Bryce Bowers.
Bryce has been a friend of mine for about 10 years now, which sounds crazy to say. We went to undergrad together and we were in an improv troupe together for 2 years. And he is one of my closest friends now. So extra special. He actually officiated Hannah and my wedding, and that was the first wedding that he officiated. So we also went through marriage prep with him, which was what inspired us asking him to be on this episode. So Bryce is a pastor in Iowa, and he has now, I think, officiated a few weddings, gone through marriage prep a few times with different couples. And this is a tool that he likes to use that I had never heard of before. And he also uses it outside of just marriage prep. I know that too, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit more. But for anyone who is wondering what we're talking about now, as we've been kind of alluding to it, we are talking about the Enneagram. So, Bryce, to start off, we start off each episode by asking how each other is doing. So I think we'll start off by asking you, how are you doing today?
Thanks, Tyler, and thanks for having me on here. I think this is a lot of fun. I'm really proud of you guys for doing these. This is enjoyed the first 2 episodes and glad to be on this third one. I'm doing okay today. Obviously, there's stuff going on in the world. I know maybe when people are listening to this, they know the future of how elections end, and we still don't know. We get to be all sort of in the dark, but maybe those listening know. But so I'm doing okay. All things considered, COVID's also starting to hit a little bit home with folks up here. Iowa's getting hit hard. And so just general world population. But I got to go on a walk today with my wife and my son. And, you can't complain when it's nice weather, 70 degrees in November. So I guess okay. We're doing okay.
Yeah. So if that's okay to share too, that you're a new dad.
Yeah.
How old is Jasper now?
He is going to be 6 weeks on Wednesday. So 5 weeks, I guess. I guess it's only Friday, isn't it? 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So.
The cutest baby ever. I can't wait to snuggle him. Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm doing just okay today. I have definitely not got enough sleep this week, so a little groggy at the moment. But it's been kind of a long, stressful week for a number of reasons. I'm excited to be doing this episode, though. It's the highlight of the week for sure. And Hannah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing better than the two of you, it sounds like. Obviously, I'm still very much invested and aware of what's going on in the world, but something that I'll end up talking about this as we dive in, but there was something that I kind of was avoiding doing because of my personality type. I found this thing to be very difficult to do, but I finally addressed that today, and it felt really good to get that off of my subconscious and my plate. And so, I'll dive into that later, but we also went on a really nice walk, just like Bryce, and the weather was gorgeous. So, I'm doing all right. So we are going to dive into the Enneagram Test, which I think we talked about it as a personality inventory, Tyler. I don't necessarily know if that's exactly the way that it would describe itself. Bryce, do you want to give us kind of this is not like a BuzzFeed article where you take 10 questions and it will tell you what type of fruit you are or whatever.
That's where I give the disclaimer again that we are not, Hannah and I are definitely not experts on this. Our first introduction to this tool was from Bryce, like I mentioned before. So that's why. And I don't think he would consider himself an expert, but I'll let him, you say that, but definitely to us.
That's definitely right, Tyler. I would not consider myself an expert either. An enthusiast maybe would be the proper term. There are actually trainings and licensures and stuff you can get to work on that, spiritual directors, counselors, people like that. So no, I use it as a tool for premarital counseling and other arenas. And so, but enthusiast would be a proper word for it. Yeah, so you're exactly right, Hannah. The Enneagram is not one of those. It's not like the Myers-Briggs test. It's not like BuzzFeed quizzes that tell you which cupcake you are, things like that. It is something a lot deeper than that, in my opinion. The Enneagram is a personality tool. Now, I know some people would very specifically say that's not how you should describe it. You ask 10 different people who like it, they would describe it differently. But to me, it's a personality tool that goes deeper into helping you understand your inner self and also helping you come to grips with the different ways in which you both struggle and how you become healthy in your own skin. And it is an ancient tool. It is not something that was dated around the internet. It has been around for quite a long time and is mostly used in kind of more spiritual settings, but now it seems like the mainstream has kind of gotten used to it. In fact, I know there's a lot of people who do not like the Enneagram because they say, oh, that's just one of those, tell me what color wallpaper to put on my bedroom walls, and why would I bother with that? And that's not what it's meant to do. It does not tell you anything like that.
Not a horoscope.
No, it is not a horoscope. It is not a social media meme. It is something a lot deeper and is intended to be something that you sit with, that you look into, that you use as a discovery, as you learn more about yourself. There are so many different aspects we could go into the Enneagram today, and we're just not going to be able to because we're just not going to have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I think at its core, it is a tool to help you recognize and uncover habits that you may have, whether consciously or unconsciously, and then help you discern how to make decisions, be in relationships, and understand yourself a little bit better. It's a lot more than a Myers-Briggs. It doesn't just tell you who you are. It also tells you where you go to in stress, where you go to when you're healthy, what is kind of your inner struggle, your dominant emotion. There's just so many different aspects we could go into, and I'm sure we'll go into a few of them here today.
I think that it'd be cool if people looked up the basic diagram as they listen, because it might help visualize what exactly we're talking about. We aren't going to, I don't know if utilize is the right word, because there are, well, let me put it this way. There are 9 types, right, Bryce?
Yes, that's correct.
There's 9 types, and it's along the perimeter of a circle. And then there are arrows, again, where you go in times of stress, where you go when you're thriving, for lack of better words. And then there's also some stuff like you have different wings. And then there's also another layer of the circle being split into thirds, where there's the feelings center, the thought center, something like that. Am I totally butchering it?
No, you're good. You're doing great.
Okay.
No, this is pretty in-depth stuff. So
cool.
Yeah,
Well,
it's easy to get overwhelmed, but that's kind of the whole point here, is that it is a deeper thing than just your regular personality inventory. Really, it kind of helps you understand yourself better. And that's why I use it in premarital counseling, because, for you guys, you really got into it, which is great. But I don't want to have to tell people, okay, this is something that we're going to go through and we're going to explain every single aspect of it. It's hey, I'm going to introduce this to you, and then you decide whether or not it's a useful tool for you or not. That's what, in my opinion, premarital counseling is for.
Yeah.
How do we start? How do I, as a pastor in my case, give you tools to help you as you go along in your marriage? I'm not going to tell you how to do your marriage, but you guys, I can certainly help you and say, this is what's worked for me. This is what works for other people. Use it how you best see fit. And Enneagram is definitely like that. So you can be on the surface level with it and understand it and do pretty good. If you want to dive deep down, right into it, right with the spiritual masters on it, you can certainly do that too.
Yeah. So you mentioned that do with it as you will, now that you've been introduced to it. And I do want to, not a disclaimer, but just preface by saying this is about knowing yourself, and you can use this as a tool to better understand your tendencies, but also be able to recognize that in other people. We're going to probably talk about at least our relationship, Tyler, and Bryce, you're married to it too. You might talk about that as well, but I don't want this to be misunderstood as this is you use it for marriage counseling, but this isn't necessarily going to be all about how we used it in marriage counseling and how we use it in our relationship, Tyler. It really, I think, is going to be focused on how we can use it to better ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the thing is I don't just use it in marriage counseling. Actually, I've had a few members of my staff take an Enneagram inventory, or if they know what their number is already, we use it kind of as a baseline, talking about what we're going through, feelings and stuff like that, how we're handling situations in the workplace. So yeah, it is much, much more than any sort of relationship tip. It's just, that's how you guys got introduced to it, and it's helpful in that way. And we can run the gamut.
Very good.
That's what I was going to add, is that's how most often I see myself using it now, is it really along those lines of getting to know myself, and it's helping me in a way forgive my worst tendencies. So I know when I'm in my most I think it's my deepest disintegration phase, I guess, is maybe correct terminology. Maybe that's not correct terminology.
That works. That's actually right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the most, self-destructive area or whatever of it, I'm able to more quickly recognize I'm doing this because these are my tendencies when I'm at my worst, and just even being able to recognize it. So
really quickly, before we get into our different types, I just wanted to quickly name all of them. I'm not going to go into what each of them entails, but just kind of an overview really quick.
A disclaimer here that the names do vary depending on what source you're using. So I think Hannah's using the
EnneagramInstitute.com.
Yeah. So if it's different than what you've heard before.
Right. These are the pretty basic ones that you see most often.
So type 1 is called the reformer. Type 2, which is what I am, this is what Bryce's wife is as well, is the helper. Type 3 is the achiever. Type 4 is the individualist. And I think I don't remember. I thought whenever we did marriage counseling that I was kind of leaning between two different types. I thought it was the individualist, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I remember that was it. It was 2 and 4.
Very good. Type 5 is called the investigator. Type 6, which is what Tyler is called the loyalist. Type 7 is the enthusiast. Type 8 is the challenger. And type 9, which is what Bryce is called the peacemaker. So yes, I think we're going to get into which type we all are and describe a little bit about it just at a baseline, or what your normal tendencies are, and then talk about a little bit at the, what your healthiest functioning levels and then your not so healthy levels. Who wants to go first? Tyler?
I think something I'd actually like to try is have you go first, then me second, and then Bryce, because what I learned today as I was looking stuff up is a 6 at its healthiest is moving toward the tendencies of a 9. So I think it would be interesting to have you go first, Hannah, then talk about me as a 6, and then have Bryce talk about being a 9. That makes sense? That work for everyone?
Sounds good.
So.
All right. Then at that, I will go first. So again, the type 2 is called, from the website I was looking at, the helper. I've seen the giver in other places. The term that most resonates with me would be the pleaser. That rings more true to me than the helper. And the reason that is because I feel that I am a people pleaser through and through. Sometimes I would rather have the approval of others, even if I don't necessarily respect a person or like them, even if I know that they like me, that is extremely gratifying to me. I know that at their core, pleasers, or not helpers, are they're very warm-hearted and generous and very selfless at their healthier levels. And at their unhealthier levels, they become quite, the term ulterior motives comes to mind. I feel like demonstrative is another word. I feel that when I am not, I'm very aware when I am doing something that, trying to phrase it exactly right.
I'll jump in here and say that there's definitely a vulnerability in learning and understanding your type, and I think sometimes it's a bit of a painful process, because if especially the parts that are, especially the negative aspects that resonate with you, and you're like, oh yeah, this is totally right, I'm uncomfortable now because of
no, it should hurt. It should hurt. And that's what I was going to mention that a little bit later. We talk about how to find your type. No, it should hurt. Like, you should be reading this and be like, this is how I feel deep down, and oh no, like, this is essentially your thing. And every single person I've worked with through the Enneagram, once we're able to find that type, they're just like, what?
Yeah.
So, oh no, or oh no is the other popular phrase.
Yeah, basically.
So we're going to forgive Hannah as she's trying to struggle through describing herself here.
It's not the most comfortable topic in the world. Well, I actually just pulled up the technical definition on this website. I might just read a few keywords that are popping out at me. Sincere, empathetic, generous, friendly, self-sacrificing, people-pleasing. Again, that jumps out at me and rings very true. And it's something that I don't exactly like about myself. I don't want to be a people pleaser over being true to myself, let's say. But I know that that is a core part of who I am. And they also have on the website, basic, like, what is the basic fear or the basic desire of these different types. And my basic fear is being unwanted or unworthy of love. And the basic desire is to feel loved. And I would say maybe more than loved, I want to be appreciated. And maybe that goes hand in hand or is the same thing. But for me, I want to feel like the actions, the giving spirit that I have is acknowledged by other people, even though I think, type 2s at their healthiest, they want to be completely, or they are, I should say, completely selfless in their intentions. That's why I said the ulterior motive thing. I feel a lot of times I expect something in return. I don't want it to go unnoticed. When it does go unnoticed, I become quite passive aggressive. And there's, I was listening to a gentleman talk, it was a doctor that was talking about this on YouTube. And he was talking about how you kind of go dark and you go silent. And the silent treatment is definitely something that I have utilized just because I have felt unappreciated at times. Again, these are not, and I think maybe it's important to say that there's no personality type that is the best or the worst. And that's not the point of typing yourself or finding which type you are. It's just like, and I don't know if we're going to talk about the love language type thing, but there's no right or wrong way to be. It's just knowing who you are and being able to accept that.
Right. There would be some folks that say the goal would actually be to embody some of each type. That's the overall goal. And, I that's one of the things I like about it. Sometimes you hear like, I need to be an INFJ or whatever, or Myers-Briggs, or lean into that. But really, like, this is more about understanding who you are and understanding that other people can also embrace who they are.
Yeah. I know that at my healthier levels, I become, because I think it's very typical of twos to ignore their own needs. They don't vocalize what they need. They focus on the needs of other people. I think this year, especially, I have had to be selfish or have, and those are two different things. Honoring yourself and speaking your mind is different from being selfish. It feels like selfishness because you're so focused inward. And it's not a very comfortable feeling for me. It's not how I've always operated, but I think this year especially, I have learned to speak up for myself and my needs. And I read on the website that is one of the healthier functioning twos, is when you not put your needs first, but you take that into consideration just as much as you would a friend's needs or a spouse's needs. I said one time to your mom, Tyler, actually, that we were having kind of a heart to heart. And I was just telling her that, I don't really know what my purpose is in life. And it got very deep. We were kind of exposing our core wounds. And I was saying how I don't know if there's a job for me out there that is going to feel like I was put on earth to do that job. And that I had recently come to terms with the thought that I think that my purpose here is to be a good spouse, a good friend, a good daughter, a good sister, a good mom someday. That is what I feel like my purpose is. And in learning about being a two, that completely rings true to me, is that I just want to be there for other people. So I feel like that knowing that about myself has highlighted moments in my life and made them make a whole lot of sense, like that conversation with my mother-in-law. I think it's also why I find I end a lot of my emails at work with, "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience," or I'll start off the thing by saying, "I am so sorry," because I feel like being an inconvenience is one of the worst things I could be. I want to go through life kind of molding myself around other people. I would rather not, have the spotlight on them. I don't want, but in a way I do. It's like you want to be appreciated. You want people to know that you are a good person, but you don't want to be called out for it. It's hard to explain. It's you want the specialness without the people seeing you as like an attention seeker, or I don't want anyone to think that I have selfish intentions.
You want to be acknowledged for doing things for other people. You want to be acknowledged for your selflessness, but you don't want to have the focus on you. What you want to give to other people and be acknowledged for, you don't want to have that. So the example being you getting sick, and so much of the focus having to be on you, to, especially in the early stages of and we talked about this in our previous episode, but the early stages of you not really being able to walk by yourself and needing help getting around and things like that. That was uncomfortable for you to ask for things that you needed at that time.
It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling, and while at the same time a very humbling feeling to need the help of others, and being so grateful for that. But yeah, I think that's also not to get into that too much, because we already covered it, but I feel like that's why it was, once I realized the depth of which, or the seriousness of that situation, I realized, this is how long I've been in the hospital. I realized the implications of this diagnosis, and I realized how many people are thinking and praying for me. I just wanted to get as well as I could, as fast as I could, so that people were no longer worrying about me. And I think that I moved so quickly through the first couple of weeks, maybe month that I was out of the hospital, that I didn't actually totally come to terms with what like my hearing loss meant to me and things like that. Because I was so focused on everyone was staring at me, I felt like, and I wanted to just become like so much better than I was even able to be. But again, at a rapid rate so that people could start turning their gazes outward and focused on the things that they would normally focus on. And then once that, pressure was taken off, then I finally was able to stop and think and slow down. And, I think I had a moment where I kind of realized what all of it, the significance of everything, what, had on me. So yeah, I have a few more notes. There was something that I heard from a video that I was watching today that twos want people to be mind readers. They don't, and it kind of goes with what I was saying about you don't want to speak. I say you, I'll just say me. I don't like to speak up for myself, or I don't want to have to say, I need this right now. I need you to drop what you're doing and focus on me. So I would rather, seal my lips and have you know me so well that you have to know what it is that I need, as opposed to having that uncomfortable moment where you have to, voice your needs. I want other people to be mind readers. And when he said that, I thought, yeah, totally.
Yeah, not to interrupt you on describing yourself, but it really comes down to often, and I see this in a lot of the twos I know, you want to know that other people love you as much as you love them. Mm-hmm. And so you still want to help them, and you still want to be that, kind of, I don't know, I just wouldn't keep saying helper feeling, like position. At the same time, you are so much about people that you want to know, and like, because the basic fear of a two is being rejected by those that they love. Mm-hmm. And so you want to know and feed off of that love, and you give look at this podcast, you're putting out love, you're trying to help people, and then you're getting a chance, you want that back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense.
And the so that's another note that I had was sometimes the things that I do are not always for the most selfless reasons. In fact, sometimes I think that there's quite a I want to help people because I want like you said, that affirmation that I'm a good person. I want people to, be a mirror for my the view of myself. Like, I think I'm a very helpful and good person. So I'm putting that out there, and I want to see that reflected in the words of the people that I love. So it's not always for the most, it's not even that it's not a selfless reason, but I do expect, even though I pretend like I don't, I do expect recognition and appreciation. And then the last thing that I got from that video, and this is just the briefest overview, and there's a lot that I'm not going to cover, but there was something that they said, that this gentleman said, this doctor, he talked about why nitpicking hurts the feelings of twos a lot. And I think it's because I feel like, you give so much of your time and energy and resources. And when somebody is coming in and starting to criticism of any kind, I think is extremely difficult for twos, or at least myself, to handle and deal with. And even if it's constructive criticism and it's not meant to just be a tool to hurt my feelings, I just find that very uncomfortable. And I think it's because it goes against that basic desire, which is just to be loved and I think accepted and appreciated. And so criticism feels like maybe the complete opposite of that. So I find that I found that to be kind of interesting. And nitpicking is a micro version of to be rejected, maybe like your thoughts, your feelings, or behaviors are being rejected in some way or not worthy or good enough. So yeah, I wasn't really sure how to move through that. I feel like it was a little stilted and not very smooth, but it's kind of awkward just to be like on this stage.
I think you covered a lot of angles.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to go into that much detail. So.
Oh, sorry. Well,
but no, I might. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know if I can interpret my notes. Okay, I'll go next. I am a 6, as we said before, and that is, I think, most commonly called the loyalist. I also saw it listed as loyal skeptic. So the great qualities are that 6s are usually reliable, hardworking, trustworthy, and really good troubleshooters. And that is something that definitely stands out to me because I definitely, and I'll get into this a little more in the moment, but that's something I definitely see in, especially at work, is figuring out maybe thinking about things from different angles before anyone else does it first, and figuring out different ways to troubleshoot things or anticipate problems. So we talked before on either the intro episode or our first episode, we talked about me being more of a pessimist and Hannah being more of an optimist, and that kind of the angle that's framing this whole podcast. And as I was doing research, the past couple of days, listening to YouTube videos and reading some articles and things, that was one way it was described, is that 6s view themselves as realists, but other people can tend to see them as pessimists. And that comes from, we are always evaluating things from every angle. So some other things that I saw that stuck out were playing devil's advocate, trying to poke holes in everyone else's plans, and that people can find you difficult because you're always the contrarian as a 6. But then it's also to kind of the underlying thing there is that 6s can be even harder on themselves than they are on everyone else in terms of always second guessing yourself. So that is something that sticks out to me, is difficulty with making decisions, because I will be in a loop of constantly evaluating things from every angle, and I'm never actually comfortable making a decision. And I know framing that in the context of our relationship, something that I do a lot is never making a decision about what we're going to do. It's always, Hannah, well, what do you want to do? And me being like, oh, we could do this or this. And then I definitely see myself being like, well, if we do that, then we have this problem. Or if we do that, then we have this problem.
Well, and then I turn around and I'm like, well, why don't you, like, I want, what's going to make you happy? It becomes like a vicious cycle.
So and one of the things that really sticks out to me as one of the core aspects of it, I guess, is your relationship with authority and authority figures. And as a 6, and you're constantly doubting authority figures, but you also want to find a worthy authority figure, because as a 6, you have that difficulty with making a decision and being a leader, because you don't want to, you have this fear of people, and I keep saying you, but I mean me and other 6s. I have this fear of other people seeing me and giving me the same amount of criticism that I'm giving them, in terms of there's always the good and bad. There's always both sides of it. So there's never like a perfect, and it goes back to that. There's never a perfect or right answer, because my brain is just, the way I process things is constantly seeing things from every angle. So again, I don't want to be under that same lens of scrutiny and criticism that I put others under. But the difficult thing with that is it goes back to that relationship with authority, and not just and it having to be a worthy authority figure, because as a 6, when you are under an authority figure that you deem as unworthy, then it makes you rebellious and angry toward that authority figure. So then it makes you, and then you're in this position of challenging that authority figure even more, because I don't know if it's not really lack of respect. It's not that you don't respect them. It's that you don't, you're finding the flaws in what they're doing. And then there's that, I know what you're doing wrong. I don't want to be in that authority position. But 6s at their best are, do exhibit those leadership qualities. And 6s at their worst are in this, pit of despair and self-doubt at their worst. So I know that when I am super confident in something, when I'm in work, back in school, whatever, when there's something I am super confident in my knowledge of, which isn't very often, but I do fall into natural leadership tendencies where I will take the lead on something and be like, oh no, we got to do this, this, and this, because I've already analyzed this thing in my head and I do know we need to do this, this, and this. But I think once I become aware that that it's like, or there's an actual title on being in a leadership position, or if I'm moving into something where I'm like, whoa, no, that's not where I wanted to go with this. I just wanted to cover this one angle. I get really uncomfortable and I withdraw. And then I'm once again looking for a leader a leader, authority figure, or whatever that I respect, to then rely on, and again, get that focus off me. I don't want the focus on me, but I also want to make sure that whoever is there is doing the right thing. So I think going back and analyzing myself a little bit, something that I always, I think probably in school, both high school, college, whatever, I think I was probably, a lot of people viewed me as a teacher's pet, and I didn't really see it that way, because what would end up happening is I can think of, at different stages in my educational career, and I think this is the best way for me to outline an example, where I was constantly worried about messing up or not being successful in school or whatever. So what would end up happening is I would always just do what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And then I would have I would every year have that one teacher, whatever, that would like single me out and be like, hey, you did a really good job with this. And then I felt like I was like under that teacher's wing or whatever. Again, probably a teacher's pet mentality is how other people would have seen it. But then always being like, if I respected that teacher, there was a certain level of anxiety then there too that also happened, because then I was constantly worried of like, oh man, this teacher that I do respect has recognized me, and now I am terrified of letting them down. So now I've got to do everything that I can. And I think that was even more so in college, because especially freshman year, because I was undecided, and that first round of tests my freshman year went through and I got A's on every test and every gen ed that I was in or whatever. Then all the teachers were like, what? You're undecided. Let me introduce you to my department and try to get you here. So I remember that, which again it plays into me being super indecisive, because I'm like always weighing the options and always doubting any decision that I would make. So then I'm relying on, okay, where's my authority figure to tell me what the right path is? And that's definitely where I struggle there. And on the opposite of that, anytime I had a teacher who I did not view as the best, I remember having a certain amount of like underlying anger because I was like, no, you're wrong. You shouldn't be in this position because you don't know what you're doing. And, I think everyone's probably had that experience too. You have that adjunct professor or whatever that's trying to get credit for their last year of their grad school career, whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I feel like I'm just throwing somebody under the bus here, but anyway, so that's one of the things that when reading about my type was super eye-opening to me, and that's something that I constantly return to, where I'm like, this makes so much sense to me, and I had never had a tool that so spot on described it to me. And it's like I said, it's not even I haven't even dived in deep enough to learn, okay, how do I move toward a healthier direction with this? I haven't dived in that deep with the Enneagram, but every time where I think I am bordering on that lowest level, I'm like, okay, take a step back because I'm doing this because of this, which again, then plays into my type of being the analyzer and being the one to break everything down and view it. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this because of this now.
Yeah, but I think what you're describing is the actual biggest pro for the Enneagram is where do I recognize my habits? Especially when you're going to unhealthy behaviors and you say, oh, that's why I'm doing this. Like it kind of releases some of that. I don't understand what's going on. What's wrong with me? And putting that onus, it describes yourself. It is still on you, but it kind of helps you be like, oh, that, and I don't know, for me, it always makes me feel better. Like when I say that, oh, this is just my habit. This is my pattern.
Yeah. I think there's a certain, like, you feel this camaraderie with knowing, okay, so while it doesn't feel great to like, and again, they're not boxes in the way that personality inventories like the Myers-Briggs are, where it's like you go to college your freshman year and you're in your freshman seminars and they make you take the Myers-Briggs and you do all these things so you can have this like loose, this is how you interact, whatever. That's why this is such a more useful tool, in my opinion, and why it's been like, okay, I've always been skeptical, but because there are so many angles of it, it's like, no, it's not trying to dump people into boxes, but it's such a robust way of understanding yourself and understanding others. And I guess that one of the things that I wanted to mention was that I know I've gone down a lot of like my worst tendencies or whatever, which again, it's the way that I've used it. It's the way it's been useful to me so far. But to go back, one of the things that stood out to me when I was looking stuff up the last few days was this tendency of, I need a lot of hand-holding for, in terms of, I need that someone to tell me, yes, you're doing the right thing, or someone to tell me to do a decision, but then not being pressured too much, because if somebody pushes too hard for me to make a decision, then I challenge that, because I'm like, wait a second. But anyway, the like daily decisions of, what are we going to have for dinner? Or are we going to go somewhere this weekend? Or are we going to stay here? Whatever. But then in those times of actual like catastrophe, that's where sixes can tend to shine. And I have an example of this. And while I would like, if I didn't have a way to frame this, I'd be like, nope, I don't handle catastrophe well. Nope, not at all. But I'm thinking again, when Hannah got sick, and while I didn't know what to do at first, I talked about that in the previous episode. I talked about, I did need the hand holding of her parents, for one thing, to help me get through. But I saw myself, I'm someone, I don't like calling just regular, like to make an appointment for a doctor's appointment or something like that. I hate doing things like that. I hate ordering in drive-thrus. Like things like that I normally will not do, but suddenly Hannah's sick and I drop everything and I'm like, I'm doing everything that I need to do. I'm calling about I'm calling her insurance. I'm calling her work. I'm calling, like, I'm doing all these things that need to be done. Like I jump into that. Okay, now's I got to get stuff done. Like now of course, and then I crashed out.
Yeah.
Afterward, but it's this phase of like, nope. This is my moment to shine. Is I've overanalyzed everything. So now I'm rapid fire. My brain is jumping to I know the things I have to get done or the things that I have to figure out. So then that's where it's useful.
Yeah. That was really surprising to me, knowing who you are and how I've always known you to behave. When I found out that you had, let my work know that I was really sick, and that I wouldn't be back to work for a while, that you had set up my short-term disability and that you were living at home living with my parents. You were doing all of these things to keep yourself well, while also taking care of all the things that I needed you to step in and take care of. And I was so, quite honestly, just kind of blown away by all of it. And I'm sure there are things that I've forgotten that you've done while I was in the hospital, or maybe never knew.
I think it was definitely a fight or flight response, because I spend so much time in sort of a pessimistic, self-loathing type of bubble a lot of times, and constantly doubting and questioning myself. So I remember being put at this point of, I had to make the decision. Nothing else matters right now. All that matters is getting you back. And that's all I wanted was, I have to do everything that needs to be done to get you back and healthy, to get my best friend back, to get my best friend home. And that was something that was like, that was the thing. It was like, nothing matters, nothing else, nothing about my personal fears, interests, anything mattered in that moment. It was, this is the catastrophe. This is the one thing that we have to make happen. And I drop everything else to make this happen. So, that's the great part about being a 6. So anyway, I think we should move on, and Bryce, let you talk about being a 9.
Yeah, sure, I guess. Yeah. No, I've really enjoyed just hearing you guys talk about your different types, and being your friend and seeing all that in both of y'all, and
hopefully we described it correctly.
Yeah, no, 100%. And seeing, thinking about Hannah different times interacting with you, and then Tyler, watching from afar at least, but how you handled stuff with Hannah. I also think of when you guys got your house, you were showing some similar behaviors of, even though you had stuff that were wrong, you're like, we're going to just take care of it. So, that, I think that's great. I'm glad I just enjoyed listening to that. So, so my type is 9, which is the peacemaker. And being a peacemaker is exactly what it sounds like. I cannot deal with conflict, which is funny because in college I was a conflict resolution major. So I can't deal with conflict so bad I had to do my entire college about how to not be in conflict. So take that for what you want. And so with peacemaker, a lot of it is just kind of, again, that being agreeable, seeing all sides as a part of it, yes, but wanting everything to be good and happy, often optimistic is described often in 9s. They're constantly optimistic, which unfortunately sometimes can play into downplaying conflict, being like, it's going to be okay, even though it definitely won't be okay, because the ultimate goal is to find that peaceful place. And I've really always struggled with this characterization. One of the biggest characterizations that people put with 9 is the idea of being sleepy or sloths or slow, which I know many of my other 9s would be very upset that I'm talking about that, because every time I hear someone talking about 9s being sloths, I get mad. But the truth be told, a lot of it is just this general like contentedness, this, not laziness, I wouldn't call it that, but more just kind of like a
dreamlike
things will be okay, finding peace, whatever. And that can kind of lead to some sometimes it's hard to get motivated or get things done, or, you know, if there's overwhelming things, you know, looking at the phone, scrolling, just like trying to do something mindless. Every single 9 that I know has a smartphone addiction, because again, it's that, okay, I can disconnect from what's going on around me and just focus on this little thing right here and just do this and do the little scroll motion. And, you know, it is what it is. And I like being a 9. Again, I feel like once you understand your behaviors, you can kind of work them to your advantage. So, you know, whenever I experience conflict, quite often I do feel that anxiousness of like, okay, we just need to get this resolved right now, and we need to just figure it out. We just need to make everyone happy, and it'll be fine, and it'll be fine. And that's why it's so good to have my wife who says, no, you need to stick by your guns, because instead you're just trying to make everything better, but in the end, that's not going to make it better. So I feel, you know, when 9s are at their best, again, it's that kind of ability to bring people together, the ability to say, okay, I see everyone's point here, and here's how it can all work together, and it'll be great. And like solving problems and solving conflict and integrating new folks in and figuring out new solutions to problems. And that's great. Unhealthy 9s, though, retreat and don't want to put themselves out there, and instead become unresponsive and very just that in it kind of collapsing in on oneself. I'll just share this experience. I know, you know, in seminary, I remember in one class, I remember there was a moment that I and you guys know this about me, I don't actually talk all that much. Actually, when I was in a roast, the roaster said that, basically that, Bryce, why don't you ever talk anymore? Boom, roasted. Like, you know, that say something, boom, roasted. It was pretty much what that was. But, and often it's because of that general contentedness in life. You know, actually, when I'm around a group of people, I usually don't talk all that often, because I'm doing good and I don't feel the need to, I just want to listen to what other people are saying. But sometimes it can manifest in unhealthy behaviors. When I was in seminary, I remember there was one class that I spoke up, and I immediately felt ashamed that I had spoken up and said something. And I was like, oh my gosh, everyone is judging me. Everyone hates me. I can't believe this. And I had one colleague, one classmate that I had gotten some pretty honest conversations with. And afterwards I was like, hey man, like, I know you're going to tell me the truth. Like, did I just come off like a complete jerk there? He was like, what? No, like, of course not. And I was like, it just seems like whenever I speak up in class, I just feel like I'm a jerk. And he's like, no, I think everyone wants you to speak up more. You just sit there and don't say anything. And, you know, it's that idea of like, I don't want to cause conflict so much, especially in somewhere like a seminary where we're talking about religious beliefs and deep held things. It's like, I don't want to disagree with you, because like that's not cool with me. So, you know, I eventually have had to learn to speak my mind, or be very selective with what I do, and be willing to speak up a little bit more. I know that often I've seen it described one place, and I haven't seen anywhere else. So I don't know if this is an actual thing or not, but I've often seen that when 9s make a decision, because they can see all sides, that's the decision, and there's no changing your mind. And I know people that I serve in my congregation can tell you that if I've made my decision, you will not convince me otherwise.
His word is law.
Yeah, no. And that happened also in my college fraternity. Like when I would be president, you know, if I was deciding something, I was deciding it. I spent many fraternity meetings where we would just talk things to death, and no one could convince me otherwise. And finally people were like, forget it. Let's just go. Like, we'll go with what Bryce says. So, and that's not purposeful. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just how I feel. And I do think in some ways that can be unhealthy, because I want to be more, bring people together, but that just kind of what happens.
It's kind of interesting, not to interrupt, but
go ahead.
It's kind of funny that you brought up like the whole speaking your mind in a public setting, because one of my biggest fears is public speaking. I hate when I'm in front of people. Like, there was a poetry class that I had to get up and read out my poems, and I hated that more than anything. Karaoke. I hate karaoke. I hate getting in front of people and performing. I can't think of anything worse.
Because you don't want the focus on you, and but you want to support other people in there. You want to be at those things. You want to be at well, sometimes, because you also get secondhand anxiety from people really
so
bad.
But
I do
you
see
just want them to do well.
Yeah. And I definitely see you supporting people, but you don't like that focus.
Well, it's also, I think, I'm talking about like the negative things about my personality, but when it's one-on-one, I am very good at picking up social cues. And if I know the person I'm talking to, I can modify myself in a way that is most pleasing to them. And so I can try to control their view of me. And when it's on a public, in a public forum, there's so many different personality types in this sea of people. I can't modify myself in a way that
pleases all of them, that won't offend anyone or make them think negatively of you.
Right. And so what you were just talking about, Bryce, really rang true to me, which I don't know if that were, 100%, our one type, or if there's, overlap or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
that was something I was going to mention is, we're talking about, Tyler mentioned earlier that in integration, or in healthy behaviors, 6s go towards 9s, and I don't know if you're hearing any of that, but 9s on unhealthy behaviors and stress specifically go to 6s. And I've heard a lot, and there's been a lot of discussion about how right now, in the course of a global pandemic, in the course of a contentious election season, everyone is at their stress number. And I think, like, I was listening to what Tyler was saying and talking about his own number, and thinking about kind of where I've been. And one of the things is like having your belief and sticking with them, having the rules, being loyal to process, like taking care of things. And that is 100% where I'm at. I am having a hard time being a peacemaker, because I'm so much like, no, this is the way we're going to do it. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be done. I'm going to take care of this. We're going to be fine, because we're going to do this and be okay. And so at least that's when I'm feeling my best. I have to admit, I haven't quite done enough introspection to figure out how I'm at my worst during the course of this, but I've just noticed that I've kind of let the peacemaker kind of fall out the window and be like, nah, this is how we're going to do it. This is the right thing to do. And then, like, if I see but I also look for those authority figures to say, okay, who is talking about this pandemic? What is the experts saying? Because we got to go with what the experts are saying here. And if someone says, well, did you know, actually it's like this? Nah, I don't want to listen to you. You're not, I don't actually think you're an expert in this opinion. Like, this person though is, and they know it, and we're going to do what they say. And so it's interesting how different areas of our lives we can gravitate towards different numbers based on what is going on around us. So,
yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about your type?
I mean, again, 9s are really just based in, again, the ultimate need to just feel at peace, whatever that means. And again, that can be the optimism, that can have stability. I worry sometimes, and I haven't read a lot about this, and so maybe it's just me, but I feel like oftentimes 9s can get really worried about conflict and other people. And I kind of talked about that a little bit with my seminary days. Sometimes I need to just call someone and be like, hey, is everyone upset about this? Because it feels like everyone's upset. And they're like, no one's upset about this. We're fine. and again, another big issue of the sometimes becoming catatonic. Sometimes like, I had tons of plans in the course of the pandemic of things that I'm gonna get done. But when I can't feel that peace, it's just kind of this inner collapsing of, I can't do anything. I'm not gonna do anything. I need to find peace of some kind. And often that means shutting down, which I know a lot of people say for nines, a better thing to do, even though you're often daydreaming or introspective or thinking about it. You're not actually introspective on yourself. You're introspective on how are things going, what is all the different possibilities, scenarios, and some of the ways you can move into more healthy behaviors as a nine is to say, no, I'm going to be introspective on myself. Like, how am I actually feeling in this moment? Instead of trying to find the peace, what is it that I want from this situation? And I know when I've been at my healthiest, I've been able to say, no, this is what I want. This is how I feel about it. And you know what? I need to be able to express that. And I don't know what we're going to talk about next, but there's something that my wife and I have discovered. And Hannah, as you mentioned, she's also a 2. She's also a helper, wanting be a people pleaser, so a people pleaser and someone that keeps the peace in the same household can sometimes cause problems because we're trying to be careful of everyone other's feelings. And we've recently discovered to do a better job of communicating our feelings to other people. And while that has sometimes caused some painful conversations and uncomfortableness for us, we're learning that is how we can grow deeper in our relationships and also, just be more complete people and be more happy just in general.
That was going to be the way I pivoted from this, conversation about who we are, and kind of open it up for more of a dialogue was, so now that we know what our types are and we feel exposed and uncomfortable and it sucks, what do you do with that? And you kind of just mentioned a situation. I alluded to this at the beginning, but I was recently in a situation. So because of the, because of COVID and because I am immunocompromised, great combination, we have been wrestling with this idea of spending the holidays with family, getting together indoors because it's cold outside. And as people do throughout the night, you just get closer and closer. You get more relaxed. It feels safe because you're with family. Well, my family feels safe. And so people just get more comfortable and the masks tend to slip or come off. And so we just felt that it was within our best interest to spend the holidays alone / with each other and but not go to my parents' house. And that decision, having to vocalize that to my family, was very difficult because I was so worried about disappointing people. Again, I'm a people pleaser. I want to make people happy, and to think that I was going to disappoint, especially my, my sister and her family have to travel here, and knowing that they were going to come all this way and not see us. And maybe that's giving us a lot of credit, but I was worried about hurting people's feelings. And as I worked through the emotions, I realized why that was so troubling to me. And once I was able to identify that, and knowing that was the, maybe poor, it's not even like the worst sides of me, it's just the unhealthy side of, my personality type, I realized I need to just push through it and get to the other side, especially because I think I anticipate the worst reaction, just to maybe it's just a defense mechanism, who knows, but in being able to identify that, I was able to force myself basically to let them all know, hey, this is our plan. This is why, you may not like it, but I just hope that you respect it. And anyway, their response was actually great. All of them were like, we just want you to be happy and healthy. And I should have expected that. But again,
But you're worried about rejection. Like
right.
your need is to love or to have love and or to be close to your people. And so ultimately your ultimate fear is rejection.
Right.
And so you can convince yourself that you're going to have rejection. I mean, again, if we're comparing, and I do this all the time because again, I'm married to it too.
Yeah,
you know, your need is to love and you don't want to be rejected. My need is to have peace. I don't really care if people love me. I just don't want them to yell at me. So it's similar needs, but your underlying motivation for why you behave that way and what you feel like you need is so important, because it can help you decipher those situations and say, wait, why do I not want to talk to them about the holidays? Like, I know I have to have this conversation, but why is it making me so worried about it? Well, in your case, be rejected. I would, and if I was in your shoes, and actually am in your shoes, I would be more worried about being like, I don't want this whole yelling thing. I don't like yelling. Like, please don't yell. And so that, again, it's all about what is your inner motivation? What is it that you need to feel you?
So Bryce, is it for you, when it comes to conflict, you just mentioned yelling. Does it really bother you when people come to you with like a concern or something that directly opposes you, and it does cause friction between you and this other person, like somebody from your congregation or a friend or anyone? Is it the aggressive attacking, or does it go down to just the confrontational level of having like a disagreement?
Kind of, maybe both, not at all.
Great answer.
Yeah, no, it's really kind of the anticipation more than anything. Like, because once you're in it, like for me, it's more of a piece. And like the folks in my congregation that disagree with most will tell you, at least I hope they tell you, they tell me, so I hope they tell you, even if I disagree with them, they know that they can come up to me and tell me that they disagree with me and tell me why. And I will listen to them. And I think for me, the ability to listen to some, because I have to admit, sometimes my pastoral role kind of takes over what I actually kind of sometimes feel, because I'm like, this is my job, this is my calling, this is something that I want to do. So I am more able to listen and try to understand someone's perspective. And typically when someone is upset with me and telling me why they're upset, I know why they're upset and I can understand why they're upset.
Sure.
And so like, I don't even take it really personally. I don't remember the last time I took a conflict personally, because I'm like, this isn't really about me. This is about this, because I can see where their perspective is. Granted, I've very rarely, if ever I can remember, had someone say that they hate me. So I guess that works out. So, to answer your question, sort of, it's more of the anticipation before, when I'm like, we're not at peace here. Like there's something going on and I need to know what's going on. Yeah. But once it's out in the air and it's been named, like, even though I don't like the yelling, I don't like the tension, once it's over, it's like, this is so much better. Like we can now peace be restored here. And that's why, I often tell folks, if you have an issue, tell me, because I can pick up on it usually pretty quickly that someone has an issue. I often don't like to initiate and say, hey, I know that you have an issue with this, and let's talk about it. Like I am terrified of doing that.
You don't want to start the conflict.
Oh no, absolutely. And honestly, that's where I get in trouble, quite frankly, a lot of times is when I don't initiate those conversations. But once they're over, like it's forgotten. It's not a problem. Again, I don't take anything personally. And so it ends up so much better. It's just getting ramped up to it is difficult. And that's why some of the people that know they can talk to me and know me the best in my congregation are in my office all the time, because they know they need to come to me.
Sure. And I'm sure that also, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but like every time you have moments like that where it is uncomfortable and you get to the other side, because I assume that you have moments like this somewhat regularly as a pastor. Maybe I'm wrong, but do you feel like you get better and better every time it happens because you've gone through it enough times that, and you've been able to come out the other side and, you know, I'm okay, feel like, okay, this wasn't as bad as I ramped it up to be in my head. Do you feel like you get more confident in dealing with conflict?
Yes and no. Yes, as in when it happens with the person again. Like if I have a conflict with somebody and then I have a different conflict with them again, I'm not as worried about that. Like I feel more at peace. I feel more confident in dealing with that person because we've dealt with it before. Sure. And we've hashed it out. We've had the conversation. As far as like, if it's the first time with someone, I don't ever think I get any better at it.
You can't apply the same situation.
You don't know how it's going to go. So
I don't know how it's going to go. Is this person going to yell and scream at me? Is this going to be like a subversion kind of thing? Am I just going to look stupid? Like, no, it's definitely once I've dealt with it once, like then I'm good, you know, and we can deal with it again. And I think that works out well for me personally. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I need to have that initial, like, okay, this is how we work together. And honestly, a lot of that might be because of my background in conflict resolution and being able to know, like, okay, like I know the background of this conflict and how to look at the core of it. And, you know, when we talk about how do we resolve a conflict, you know, what are the different negotiation styles? Is this person someone that's going to ram you over, or is this someone that's going to want to negotiate, or is this someone that is kind of timid about bringing a conflict? You know, that probably has more to do with my own knowledge of conflict than it is my 9-ness.
You know, I never knew that you did that. I didn't know that you were in a conflict resolution role in college. I
mean, that was my major. And it's funny, and I guess I'll say this, the people in conflict management were the ones that were the worst with conflict. The worst at communicating or dealing with conflict were those that were in that major. And I think that was because we all recognized that we wanted to understand it better and try to get better. And
I think that is a common way of picking a major. Without saying too much, I definitely ended up as a psych major for a reason. So,
there you go.
So Tyler, have you been able to, now that, you know, since we went through this with Bryce, have you been able to use the Enneagram, knowing your type, knowing where you go in times of stress? Have you ever found yourself being able to identify when you are at those unhealthy levels, and has it helped you get out of it faster?
I think that I definitely, it's one of those things where, like, as I'm analyzing everything, I also, there's the obvious things that I ignore when I'm at my worst. I think that I'll ignore. I'm like, I know that's a thing, but I'm going to, and I think that that's where, like, when it comes with having a tool where it's like, I'm like, okay, when I'm in my analysis paralysis, like everything seems terrible phase, it's hard for me to accept that there could be a way out of a situation. So it's usually to say I have to take a step back. Once I can take a step back, then I can be like, okay, I was doing that because of this. So I think as far as, I don't think I'm necessarily in a place yet where, and again, I haven't explored it a lot since, and this has been a fun exercise getting ready for this episode because I've been diving in. I'm getting like, oh yeah, I forgot how helpful and useful this is as a tool. And that's why we're doing this episode. And that's where I'll say, like, part of our idea behind this was, we know probably some people that are listening will be familiar with the Enneagram. Some probably more familiar than us, and some that this will be the first they're hearing of it, or maybe they've heard it mentioned somewhere else. That's where we really wanted to have this as a kind of an introductory episode or whatever. So it's been fun for me to dive back in, and I do see myself when I when I think back, and I can recognize specific times or specific interactions, specific relationships with people. And especially I talk about that authority and security dynamic of my type 6 so much, because that is something that I've definitely, in the last, handful of years or whatever, it's been something that's I've definitely been able to be like, okay, now I can see everything that I'm having issues with right now. I can see it on this scale of, okay, I am framing things in this way, and I'm framing things from these, how I view other people's handling of situations, or as an authority figure or whatever. And so yes and no, because it does help me recognize when I'm actively thinking about it does help me recognize things more. But I think there's also, again, where I'm at my most dysfunctional phase or whatever, then I'm choosing to actively ignore it or whatever. Well, it's like, it's there's a voice in the back of my head, but it's like I'm ignoring that or whatever. I did want to talk about, I know for you and I, because that's another really useful thing, and I think we've kind of touched on this, but on the Enneagram Institute website that we've been mentioning, another one of the cool things is it shows you how you interact with other people, or it gives you guidelines for how you interact with the other types. And
not so much guidelines, just as descriptions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm butchering my words right now. I'm getting like flustered. Anyway, but I know, and which obviously is one of the reasons why you introduced it to us, Bryce, in marriage prep, and that's one of the super useful aspects of it. And that's where one of the things that stick out to me. I was reading over ours just a second ago, looking over ours, and yours and mine, Hannah, and that it says that we, so I know that there's the aspect of I rely on you because I know how caring and I'm summarizing this in my own way and applying it directly to us, but there's that admiration for you in terms of I can view you as this authority figure that I'm looking for, as this.
I wear the pants and the relationship.
There's this aspect of you as a rock, which again is what launched me into panic when you were sick, and I no longer had you because I could know. I mean, that's what brought me into my, fight or flight instinct with you getting sick, was I no longer have my compass or whatever, however you want to think of it, to go to, because I'm like, I'm going to bounce things off you. But that doesn't mean that I don't reject things you say all the time. You try to help me because your desire to help me means you're flooding me with options, and that's one of the things that happens with our dynamic, is that I will, you're trying to help, and then eventually I'm like, just get off my back, leave me alone. Yeah. But then I'm like trying to pull you. It's this push and pull, because I'm like, I want you to help me. I want you to give me answers because you're the person that I'm respecting to give me guidance. But then it's like, if I'm not hearing what I want to hear, whatever, or like, or you're telling me things that I already know, but I can't accept, then that's hard on you, because then you're feeling rejected by me, and then you're not getting the appreciation aspect that you need. So
something that I didn't read this on the website, and in fact I haven't seen it anywhere really about twos, but I think it maybe just goes without saying, and that's why I haven't read it. But I find it extremely troubling is probably the best word to describe it, but almost disturbing to me when I don't know how to help somebody. It is.
Go on.
What did you say, Bryce?
I said, go on.
Oh, go on. Yeah, like I know he's not saying that because he sees that in me. It's because he sees that in Teresa.
No, it's both. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like, it's it is deeply disturbing is the right word, because it becomes like, it's like, because I don't understand a situation well enough, or I feel like I don't have enough power in a situation to actually affect it, no matter how good my advice is, it becomes like I don't even know who I am anymore, if that makes any sense at all. It's like, I don't know if I am not able to fix the situation or at least provide a useful tip. I feel disoriented in my own skin. Like I don't know if I can't be a counselor or a, person to be able to be relied on. Who am I?
Well, that's because that's when you feel like you're at your best, is when you're helping somebody.
Yeah.
And so if you're not able to do that, it's just, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And that's your ultimate motivation, is to help people. Well, then if you're not doing that, what's the point?
Especially when I feel like there's a really bad problem, like a very, serious problem, and I can't help it. Or if I feel extremely confident in the advice that I'm giving or the help that I'm trying to give somebody, and they don't take it. Oh my God. There was, I like flash back to a time when I was in high school. There was somebody, I won't get into the situation, but I knew the advice I was giving was spot on. Like, I mean, chef's kiss. I knew it was top notch, and the person didn't take it, and they continued this pattern, and I was so distraught. It was just so upsetting to me. So yeah, I don't know what more to say on that, other than it's very troubling. And like I said, I didn't see that anywhere, but probably because it's so obvious.
But then, so here's my question for you, Hannah. When you can't help people, because there are situations where we want to help people, but we can't, what do you do with that?
Well, I feel like I have come to terms. I feel like I'm a little bit better than I was in high school, emotionally matured. But I know deep down that people have to want that help. It's upsetting to me. It's, it hurts my feelings quite honestly. But I feel like I've come to terms with the fact that that's the other thing, is that I think that I'll know the best solution, but I don't know all sides of every situation. I'm not living in, anyone's world except my own. And so, I feel like I've definitely become more, just accepting of that fact. But I also, you said, how do I handle that? Or what do I do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, I do know that oftentimes people do not necessarily need, a solution. It's that they just need somebody to be around and have their ears open, and they just need to be validated and heard. Sometimes help looks like that, and it's a difficult thing, but it's also become an easy thing too.
Absolutely.
I think you do get angry though I think you can get angry when you aren't in a stage where you're ready to accept that what they need, maybe what they need at the time is just be heard. And I think that's valid.
It's like, I hear you, but have you considered this option?
And I think that's what you're saying, is that you're right, and that you have part of your journey has been learning how to accept that more when people, me for example, is not actually accepting the help you're trying to give, but that's the person that you're trying to help, me for example, maybe isn't in the spot yet to be able to do that, even if they know themselves that yes, you're right, you are right, but I can't do that yet. I'm not there yet.
Right. And you can't, that's the thing, is that you can't make decisions for people. And that's very, that was very difficult in the situation that I was alluding to. I just wanted to jump inside of that person's body and make all the good decisions that I felt like that needed to be made, and then hop out and just show them, wasn't my way better? See the place that you are now is a forest of flowers and there's a rainbow overhead. Like,
and again, this is what we're talking about here is exactly why it's so important. And, we're talking about the Enneagram, and yes, absolutely, we should be. But, when we're talking about getting to know yourself, when you understand what your basic desires are, and if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go into some religious territory here for a second.
Go for it.
When you know what your basic desires are, one of the great religions of the world talks about desires as detachment, and that is one way to deal with desires. For me, and my understanding of the world and how we are as humans, desires are almost impossible to detach ourselves with. But if we understand what our desires are, if we understand how we can, in our own souls and our own spirits, feel whole and know what it is we want, then we can start to say, like in your case, well, I can't help this person. So how do I deal with that? Well, maybe I just need to not, helping them might look differently than what I want. It's not about me anyway. Mm-hmm. My desire to help them needs to be on them and how they feel. Or maybe I need to let go of the fact that I can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to recognize that desire to help is not going to be met here. Mm-hmm. And then you can detach it a little bit. Yes, but more it's how do I control that desire? How do I live into that desire? How do I reposition that desire to something else? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, for me, I want peace. I want tranquility. I don't want there to be conflict. In the midst of a global pandemic and people with lots of different feelings and having divisiveness that we have in the culture, I recognize I'm not going to necessarily find peace everywhere.
Yeah.
But can I find peace within myself, within my own home life? How do I find peace with who I am as a person? And so I can redirect that desire, that soul's yearning is what a lot of the masters might call it, that soul's yearning, that desire, into something that makes me feel whole, instead of trying to get something that is not going to be attainable anyway.
Yeah.
So.
It's really interesting. So,
and some people would disagree with me on that, but that's what we're here for.
It won't be us.
Something that's been sticking out to me is, Bryce, you introduced your type as, you don't talk a lot. You're sitting back and kind of digesting what's going on. And that's where, not just obviously because you're more knowledgeable of the Enneagram than Hannah and I are, but your ability to understand people in general and the people around you. There's so many, like, just the way you react when Hannah was describing things earlier, and like the way you're immediately like, yeah, go on. Like the way, and that's the same thing. Like, I know when we initially took our test and gave you our results, and I think one of the tests that I took, it had me like straddling 2. And I know Hannah had one too, where it was like, I think we mentioned that earlier. She was like straddling at 4 also or something. I don't even remember what the other one was that I was, but it was probably me second guessing a couple answers, and throwing. But but I remember talking to you, and you're like, nope, you're definitely a 6. Nope, you definitely are.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that I'm curious of your perspective on being a 9 and your observance of everything else, and not wanting to be the one to leap forward, but how that has so many times you've been in leadership positions. I mean, you were the troop leader for our improv troop. You were our captain. That's what I'm looking for. That was the word I'm looking for. What I'm going to butcher is I'm forgetting title. President, is that president of your fraternity? Is that the right term?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And now you're a pastor, and I'm sure there's stuff that I'm leaving out, but I just keep thinking of how you end up in these leadership positions, which is great for someone who's a peacemaker and somebody, and then also your ability to, once you make a decision, that's going back to that, once you make a decision, that's the decision. And that's a great thing. And again, that's something obviously that I seek out when I'm looking for an authority figure or someone to look up to. I'm looking to someone who I know has actually cared and considered the aspects of everyone and then made the decision based on, okay, no, this is what's right. And I know you have this underlying motivation of wanting to be the peacemaker and do what's going to be best for everyone. Is that all fair?
No, that makes sense.
What was that question again?
No,
I think there was a question in there.
I want to unpack a couple of things that you said there, actually. One, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And I don't know if it's my 9-ness or just the fact that I'm a pastor. I mean, there's a lot of people that say to me like, oh, you think this, and then because you said it, I can kind of trust in that. And it's like, well, that's terrifying. Like, I hope I got that one right.
Yeah.
So, but it is one of those things where I think I know several 9s in leadership. And again, it's so important to have that. No, I do see both sides of this. I truly do, and I'll just be quite open about it. I sometimes get in trouble as a pastor because I want to see both sides of it, though there is in my opinion, a true and good and holy side of it. But I need to be able to talk to people who are getting to completely different conclusions before we get to that center point. And so I have to have that credibility with them that, no, I don't think they're just stupid and wrong, which I don't. I understand how people get to where they are. So I don't really think there are people that, there is wrong and right, obviously, but I'm like, okay, you're not stupid. I understand how you got there. I don't agree with you. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's something you should be thinking or saying or believing, but I get how you got there. And I think it's important to have that because you want folks who think the best of you. Like you want to be in relationship with people who don't think you're a jerk, or who let me rephrase that. You want to be in a relationship with people that don't think you're a jerk. Yeah, that's exactly right. I did want to unpack there though, Tyler. You talked about the typing that we went through when we did this in premarital counseling, how we came to your types. So it is very important. Another person cannot type you. Like they cannot do it. They can get close. They can know. And for me, one of the reasons I advocate if someone's going to use the Enneagram, yes, there are tests out there you can take, but you should also go through this test with someone, whether it be a counselor or a spiritual advisor, a pastor, someone who's familiar with the Enneagram and says, okay, can pick that apart. Because I've had someone that I worked with that was, when they did their test, they were in between 2 types. And quite frankly, I'm still not sure if I've got the right type for them. But, you ask like, well, okay, how have you been feeling lately? Are you more stressed? Maybe you're on this type because you are more stressed. Or the person who typed me originally, when I did the test, I came out as a 2. And the person said, okay, no, you're not a 2 because you're here at seminary, you're a minister, and a minister just wants to help people. So let's make sure you're not something else first. And then once I lived more into the 9, which was my second thing, then we started being like, oh, okay, this is right. And we got to talk through it. And she asked me questions and I was like, yeah, you're a 9. Sorry. And there's another interesting part of that we can talk later. But the main thing there being other people cannot type you. Only you can type you. And one of the hardest things about the Enneagram is often people get mistyped. And they say, oh, I thought I was this type, but as I learned more about myself, I learned more about the Enneagram, I'm actually this type. And being open to that change, a lot of people say your Enneagram number doesn't change. I've actually seen a lot of evidence to suggest, and people that I know, that their number does change as they grow, as they become different people, which we grow. Like, of course, our personalities are going to change over the years because we change over the years. We go through different things. And so it's important to kind of hold this a little bit loosely and be like open to the possibility that, well, you know what, I have changed a little bit. and accept that and be okay with that. But yeah, it's very important that if someone says, you're a this type, you can usually be like, well, maybe, but let me do my own self-reflection on that. And again, like we said at the beginning, this work should hurt. And so if you see a description of it and it hurts, it's probably your type.
I just want to add that we will link to a free version of an Enneagram test in this posting, but in the description. However, again, we're going to give you a free version, which is going to be an abbreviated version. So is it the most thorough? No, but hopefully it will be a jumping off.
Yeah.
And there are other ones you can go on there. There's one called the WEPS, the WEPSS, which is about, I think it's like $12 or something like that, that are a little bit more in depth. And in my experience, do a little bit better job getting the right type. And again, sometimes what I find helpful is there are several different tests out there. If you take several different ones and compare kind of where you're at, you can usually figure that out. I mean, that's what I do in premarital counseling. If you guys remember, I had you take 2 tests. So then we could kind of compare them. But yeah, I mean, it's important to keep in mind, this is not work that someone else can do for you.
Right.
This is work you have to do.
Yeah. And do we expect the average person who clicks on this and listens to it to, go find a counselor and go through it with somebody else? I don't expect that. But like Bryce said, I found it supremely helpful to be walked through it with somebody who knew more about it than I did, who knew the full, the whole Enneagram type list, to be able to make that determination, or not determination, but to be able to weigh, your behaviors and your responses to the questions between different types. And if you are leaning between 2 different types or 3 or whatever, being able to have the full knowledge of all of them and be able to differentiate.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we said, we'll link to that. I did want to ask you guys a question before we move into wisdom nuggets, but do you feel like you've ever achieved the healthiest level of your type? Have you, in the last couple of years or ever in your life been at that like peak optimal stage? Either of you?
I think I've glimpsed it by accident here and there. And I kind of touched on this earlier where I mentioned times where I've slid into an accidental like leadership role. And it wasn't something that was like defined. It was like, I jumped onto, I feel confident in this thing that we're doing right now. So I jumped on like, this is what we should do. But beyond that, no, I don't think so. And never for any extended period of time. I think it's definitely just been, retrospectively, I can be like, here and there it was sprinkled in where I, kind of maybe got a taste of what that would be like or whatever. So I don't know. How about you, Bryce?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's been glimpses. There are plenty of times where, I can recognize and be like, you know what, life's pretty good. I can feel at peace. And, a lot of folks talk about, when 9s are at their best, they're at one with themselves. They are contented. They are present to their needs and who they are. They're very introspective. They know themselves, and they know others. They're connected. If being a unhealthy 9 is detachment and letting go and collapsing in on oneself, a healthy 9 is someone who's connected to everyone and to themselves. And I've definitely felt that at times. I admit though, because, my fear of not having peace often knocks me out of that place. I can have a day where I'm feeling connected and everything's good and I feel like I'm approaching that best self, but then immediately, bam, conflict, back down a couple rungs. And I think that's okay. I think that's how everyone is at some point or another. I don't think anyone of us get there kind of what Tyler said, we're not there for a long time. We see glimpses of it, but that's part of being human. So.
And I don't even necessarily, I don't know this, but I wouldn't even say that like, it's not like a ladder where you have, you know, you take one step at a time. I feel like in one day I could be at a very unhealthy level, and then with just enough time passing or a really unexpected and you know, happy occasion comes around or something, and I can leap from one level to another level within an hour or so, depending on what's going on in the day. I feel like I've always thought that I would be at my, well, always thought, meaning since we've been introduced to this, which has not been that long, but when I've thought of being the most deeply selfless person that I could ever be, I've always thought that the only way I would ever get there would be like when I became a mom, would be, you know, to have a little baby that I have to take care of. And every, you know, I'm just seeing this with Teresa. It's like, I mean, you just give so much of yourself. I'm not there in person to see you guys waking up in the middle of the night or whatever, but I can, you know, put my mind there. You just give so much of yourself, and you have to be, I imagine, so selfless with your time, your body, you know, your sleep, whatever. And I've always thought that would be the way to get there. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but I do look forward to the day that I experience that. Like I said, I don't know. I've always wondered. So I don't know. Is there anything that you want to talk about before we get into wisdom nuggets, Tyler?
I don't have anything. I wanted to give Bryce another opportunity if you have anything else you wanted to say about how you've used it, when you've found the Enneagram, how you've used it, when you've found it helpful, maybe if there's been any times where it wasn't helpful in a particular situation, or somebody rejected using it as a tool, or anything like that. I mean, anything like that, any stories you want to share, anything like that. I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of have the floor
absolutely.
with anything you want to add.
Yeah, I've got two things. One is that this is a very complicated tool, but it's also very easy to enter into. You know, once you figure out what you think your type might be, you know, there is a whole world to explore at that point. And that's, again, why we use it as a tool. You know, it starts a conversation. It is not the end of a conversation once you find out what you are. It's the beginning of self-discovery. And that's what life is in general. It is the understanding and the constant unpacking of who you truly are. And so, you know, don't be afraid to get into it a little bit. You don't have to dive in deep into it. You can find out your type and think, that's great. But I think it's helpful when we keep it in the back of our minds, and say, you know, oh, that Enneagram thing said I do this. I'm doing this now. How do I fix that? Like, what is it that I'm really am I really like overwhelmed, or is it that I'm not feeling at peace? Is it really that I'm angry, or is it because I can't help this person? Or is it really that I don't like them, or am I just not sure of what they're saying? Like, you know, it's a good thing to have in the back of your mind. It's another tool to use. And then the second thing I would say about, just to kind of finish up, I think it's interesting because the Enneagram is one of those things that talks about our deepest selves. One of the things that we run into is this idea, you know, I thought it was funny. There's so many different ways to interpret who we are, and we make that own meaning. And so when we talk about the Enneagram, it's really, really tempting to be like, I'm going to be the best peacemaker I can be. I can be the best 2 or 6 that I'm going to be. But the reality of what we're looking at here is this is some way to help you become more balanced, to become more fulfilled, to become more integrated into who you are. And so you can't become the best one that's ever won in the face of all the ones, but truly it helps you understand who you are. And that's why, and we didn't even touch on this very much. And a lot of times what determines your number in Enneagram is what you go through in your childhood. Something in your childhood, a need that you did not get, is how you come to your number. And sometimes that can help you unpack things. That can help you deal with things that you've gone through in your past and face them and say, that's why I am the way that I am. And just like any other kind of personality tool, whatever else, it doesn't define you, but it can help you. So.
Yeah. And we're not going to get too deep into that because Tyler's dad listens to this and my parents have listened to this podcast. So I don't necessarily know how.
And don't feel bad because everybody is messed up in childhood. There's no one that gets through unscathed.
And that's because there's no such thing as perfect people or perfect parents.
Absolutely. And it's not even your parents' fault often. I got to be honest. Mine is that someone didn't listen to me, I think is what the 9-1 is. And I honestly, I can't tell. I'm still working on where that came from. I'm not sure. Like I would say, oh, that's my parent. Like you traditionally say that's your parents' fault, but I don't know. Like, don't worry about that.
I think that's one of those things where it's a good one to unpack yourself. If you read if you look up your Enneagram, if you know your Enneagram type, if you type in Enneagram type 6 childhood wound or whatever, like you'll find out what it is for the type. And then I think you can unpack that yourself. Or, I mean, I think, again, a good thing to unpack with a counselor, or whether an Enneagram expert, an Enneagram counselor, or just a regular counselor, psychologist, whatever. Like, I think it's something that it can be helpful. I mean, and it's no, and that's no stranger, I know, to psychology anyway, and counseling anyway, to unpack childhood events that may have impacted where you're at today. So
and I would encourage folks, if you do this, to seek other information. I mean, you guys do this. Seek out other people who are your types, because one of the most healing things that I've done in the course of the pandemic was get in a virtual room with other 9s, other 9s that are pastors specifically, and talk about the pandemic, being a pastor during it, what's going on. It was like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is like other people feel the way that I do, and that's fantastic. And so I'll send you guys this, but I'll just mention it here. A woman by the name of Jen HATMAKER did a series of podcasts, and she talked to different types on Enneagrams, and they kind of go through each type, and she interviews a different person and talks about how that type affects them. Also, Sleeping at Last went through and did all the 9 Enneagram types, and also wrote a song for each Enneagram type that is really moving, really powerful. I have to admit, my song was good. I didn't really feel it, but I know other people who said they've cried when they listened to the song about their type. So look for and then he again interviewed people who are that type, talked about that type, strengths, weaknesses, things that they want, desires. You can find stuff everywhere. Those are just 2 that I would lift up and say, don't be afraid to let it hurt a little bit when you're discovering who you are.
It doesn't feel good.
That was
not at first.
Just on that line, I also going to mention on the Enneagram Institute website that we keep referring to, there's also a list of famous people that are that type for each of the types. And that's kind of a fun thing to look at.
Yeah.
Like I've got J.R. Tolkien, so that's kind of fun.
That is cool. Yeah. So we did not get into all the different types. Obviously, we glossed over all of them at the beginning. We dove into 3 different ones. So unfortunately, we don't have all the types in one room. We can't interview everybody or have a conversation, I should say, about everybody. But hopefully this gives you kind of just a glimpse into what this world even is. And I'll call it a world because it is so layered and there are so many avenues you can explore. It's extremely not complicated so much as it's just deep. And we have only just glossed over it, I feel. But yeah, hopefully it is interesting to you. It was super interesting to us. All that time later, we've still thought about it. I've still gone back to the description. I find this is extremely useful. If Tyler and I are ever having a conflict, or if I just am not understanding him very well, why he's not listening to me, why he's not taking my advice, going back to my personality type, but especially Tyler's, and figuring out, what's going on here. And that has continued to be a useful tool in our marriage, but in still just, a useful tool understanding myself. So hopefully that was interesting. I do want to get into wisdom nuggets. I'll make mine really short. When I thought about the Enneagram test, I feel like all of a sudden I was working smarter and not harder. The more that I understood the people around, not even the people around me, you and me specifically, Tyler, because I don't know the types of all of my friends, because I don't know if they've taken the test. I haven't asked. But all of a sudden, I feel like I know my resource to go to understand you better, me better, Bryce better now. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I'm using a lot of maybe emotional intelligence in getting to the root of what's going on with the people that I love. So working smarter and not harder is definitely one of the biggest benefits to being introduced to this tool.
Yeah, I think for me, it's helped me. I think one of my biggest takeaways has been learning to forgive myself more by understanding, okay, I'm doing this because I have a tendency to behave in this way. And then I'm able to forgive my mistakes or whatever. I mean, I'm just able to process those better. So again, just the wisdom nugget being, this is a tool. We wanted to do this episode to introduce it to people, or if not as a first introduction for people to maybe give a different angle. If nothing else, it's a conversation with 3 people of 3 different types, talking about how we interact with each other and interact with the world. So I hope that there's something that everyone can gain from this episode, with the message of getting to know yourself, the benefits of getting to know yourself, and being able to forgive and accept yourself when you're not at your best. So,
and I guess for me, the number one thing and wisdom nugget for me is doing introspective work, unpacking who you are, hurts that you have, things that stress you out, things that help you grow, is gonna hurt. It's hard work, but often the most important things that we can do hurt a little bit. So don't be afraid to do that work. It's not going to look the same as anyone else. It may be similar, and other folks are going through the same things that you are often, but no one is you. And so only you are able to do that work. So don't be afraid to do it, because you might like who you find on the other side.
I love that.
That's great.
Very cool. Well, I enjoyed myself this evening.
This was fun. I think this is going to be a long episode, and I don't know that there's going to be anything we're cutting out. So, but I think this. Not to say I think this was a really good enriching episode, and I've definitely enjoyed myself too.
I enjoyed it too, and I really appreciate you guys having me on here. And again, I love what you guys are doing this, and best of luck as you continue on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. So for looking ahead to our next episode, we wanted to get into staying connected and how we can do that amidst, not being face-to-face with people within the pandemic, trying to stay connected to the people that you love, and how you cannot feel so lost and alone in all of this COVID scariness. But we will leave that for next week, and we really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.